And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
Sentenced to death.
Oh, fuck y'all. Hey, fuck the judge, fuck the motherfucking district attorney, the prosecutor, and fuck you motherfuckers in the jury box. Fuck all y'all.
I want them dead. I want them dead.
Tell me about these fake ass bitches.
Look here, little nigga. Most of these niggas be bitches too, but you don't never hear that side of the story. So, we finna do this shit like this. It's like, I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your fake ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. It's like I tell my niggas, keep your eyes on these bitches. They lie to G, a nigga young, dumb, and getting riches. What the fuck you think a trick is, nigga? Nigga that's thinking with his dick and then get tricked out all his riches by bitch. I'm here to school you to the rules of the game, it'll cost you. Think you owe that hoe just cause she let a nigga toss her. It's like a motherfucking privilege. She don't give up free conversation. Get that bitch on 7 digits when she call ya. That's that little tramp was up. And if she hesitate, nigga hang up, word up. And let that bitch meditate to the dial tone. And call me when you're ready to bone. And it's on. I'm motherfucking Mac tonight. Stay back, stay strapped, cause my raps is tight. You fucking punks, I hate you snitches. When against the grain and the game to be fake ass bitches. Can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your fake ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. Tell me so these bastards who's pause, run up on a real motherfucker and get tossed. The game is deep and thicker than a motherfucking shimmy. Broke hoes running around yelling, gimme. I can't stand it. Hoes talk about they got a man. Shit, all I wanted to do was suck my dick. So how about hitting the motherfucker on my pager? Busy now, bitch, but you could give me the pussy later. Fly how I fade her, played her like a game of Sega. Fucking with the player that made her. And I ain't sleeping, caught you creeping for my money. Got the dick and now you get the pistol, honey. So get the Bozak, knocking hoes back, keep my dough stacked. So where the motherfucking hoes at? Punk niggas can't fade the Mac. Living fat, getting paid to rap. It's like that, you motherfucking bitches. Fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your fake ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. I can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass snitches. Oh, you too, nigga. Don't think we ain't talking about your punk ass. You old fake ass nigga, standing there wearing all them Pendletons and khakis and all that. You soft as a motherfucking grape. Ain't this a motherfucking bitch? I can see right through your flower ass. Some of these niggas is bitches too, man, I tell you. It's gonna be harder and harder to be a thug in 94. But we gon' do this shit. Y'all take this shit and you play this shit for every single fake ass bitch out there. And there's plenty of them. You probably got one sitting next to you right now, bobbing his fake ass head to this dope ass shit that he listening to. Can't stand fake ass bitches, lying ass niggas, and your punk ass bitches.
I make this in the nicest way possible, man. You know, I mean,
Fake ass bitch.
So, welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Canarsie. And, you know, I just want to address something. And the reason why I'm choosing to do this is because I get a lot of questions every week about this topic, and I sort of stay away from it because I'm of the firm belief that whatever you do on your show is your business. I don't have the right to tell anybody how to run their show, what to do, who they can talk to, who they can't talk to. And I wouldn't want somebody saying that to me. But when it comes to platforming rats, this is a subject that sort of needs to be discussed. And I think a lot of it sort of gets lost in translation a little bit because you have a lot of people that are talking about this sort of subject who really have no skin in the game. They don't know anybody in the mob. They've never been affected by an informant. They don't have family members that went away. They don't know anybody personally. They just kind of want to jump on a trending topic. And I'm not knocking anybody that attacks informants. I'm just saying you really don't have much of a role to play in it other than to bring the public's awareness of certain situations. But you lose your audience the second you start to make fun of them. It's just how I feel about it. Facts, logic, their own words are the most powerful thing that you can do to combat that. But this is not a one-dimensional sort of issue. The question is often, why platform an informant? Well, on its face, it's easy to understand why people do that. If you're covering organized crime, the only people you're ever going to get on your show is informants. Made guys are not going to come on YouTube. But there are two ways that you can sort of handle that sort of situation, right? So number one, you can bring on an informant. You can challenge them. You can combat what they say. But the reality is, as quick as they come on, they're going to leave the show at the same time. They're not going to allow you to speak any truths that make them look bad. And I got to admit, who would want to go on a show and have shit thrown in their face that they don't really want to talk about? I understand that. I totally understand that. But you can either choose to be a person that talks about organized crime from a historical aspect, and you do kind of have a duty, if you're going to cover it from a historical aspect, to give two sides of the story. But most people don't. And that's the truth. I've been accused of that myself. So I can understand that. But like I said, if you bring them on your channel, they're not going to tell you the truth. They're going to inflate a little bit. They all do it. They all have it. And everybody knows that. That's the big open secret about this genre, is that rats lie. Everybody knows they're lying, but it's like sort of the open secret nobody wants to really talk about. But when you put them on, you're allowing them to further pervert history, which is lie-driven and benefits them and them only. And I understand the mechanism behind that. There is, however, sort of a deeper issue. And that sort of comes to a morality or a stance or a characteristic. Number one, you cannot, and I want everybody to listen to this part 10, 12, 15, 20 fucking times. You cannot hold a content creator responsible for having a moral stance or code when it comes to informants. You just can't. Okay? Number one, their show is content. They're going to put out entertainment. Whether you or I or the Pope or whoever the fuck likes it, they're entitled to do what they want. But you cannot hold them to a moral stance or a street code. Number one, no mob content creator other than informants have ever been in the mafia. Not a single one of us, me, RJ, Nadu, FBS, whoever covers mob content, none of us are in organized crime, okay? In most cases, the majority of mob content creators that are out there, and there's a bunch, not just the ones you may be familiar with, but they don't even know anybody in the mafia. They don't know active guys. They don't have friends that are in the streets. They know informants. It's always informants. And that's not to knock them. That's just the God's honest truth. Then there are those who do know people in the life, have seen friends go to prison because of the words of informants, who have had family members go to prison because of informants. And that is a big difference in sort of the moral ambiguity of all of this. If you have no stake in the game, you really don't understand it. You can understand it from the periphery. You can understand, wow, that guy got railroaded. And there's a million different cases of a million different subjects of people getting railroaded. But unless you have been directly impacted by that, you really don't know. You can sympathize. Everybody can have empathy for somebody else, but you don't really understand the mechanism of that. There is a difference between somebody sitting in a chair talking to informants versus being associated with or hanging out with guys who are active, who are in that life. It's a huge difference. And you cannot expect someone who doesn't know anybody in that life to have any sort of moral code. A lot of these people on YouTube try to hold people accountable. They should have this moral stance. No, they shouldn't. They don't have to. They're not in the streets. They're not banging around. They don't know anybody but informants. They're not hanging out with Lefty Eye Patch and Jimmy Horse Nads on the street. So they don't have to have that moral code. For some people, they led a life of crime. They've grown up. They moved on with their life. Some people keep that code intact because that's all they know, and other people just don't give a shit. So let me be clear about what I'm saying, because this is very important. I do not subscribe to, nor am I in favor of platforming any informant. That's just how I feel. But my stance is, and always has been, if from day one, your stance as a content creator is, I'm going to interview informants, and I really don't give a fuck what anybody thinks, then me as a person, I have to at least say to myself, okay, this guy has a stance, and he's going to stick to it. Fatbald Sicilian is a good example of this, and I'm only talking about this subject, okay? So before everybody goes crazy and pulls out their fucking hair and goes, oh, he's defending this one and that one. No, I'm just being honest. And the truth of the matter is that things that I say are not popular things to say. I tell you what's right. My whole entire career doing this, I have never said anything that was popular. In fact, I do quite the reverse. I tell you what the right thing is. Fatbald Sicilian, from day one, regardless of whether he liked John Gotti or not, that's unimportant. He has said, I will have informants on my show, I will interview them, and I don't give a fuck what you think. Okay, and he hasn't changed. Whether you like that or not, he stuck to his beliefs. He stuck to his guns. That's him. He doesn't owe you, me, or anybody an apology for that. He doesn't have to have the same viewpoint as anybody else. Freedom of choice. Now, if you don't like it, don't listen to it. There's nothing wrong with somebody dictating how they're going to do their own show. Jeff Nadeau has informants on his show, and he's been clear from day one. That's what I'm going to do. Do you think Jeff Nadeau's a gangster? He's not. Why are you holding him to some weird fucking accountability? RJ, he has on Mikey Scars every day. I think that's what they're doing. I don't watch it, to be honest, not much of it. But RJ has Mikey Scars on. And he's getting stories, and some of these guys are getting stories from sources of information. There's a difference between like a Gene Barello and a Mikey Scars. Let's just be honest. Let's just call a spade, okay? There's a big difference between who those two people are. Tom LaVecchia, he has had a ton of informants on his show, and he knows that they aren't telling him the truth. And he knows that they're inflating. And people have criticized him, and justifiably so for that. But his job is to present the rat on his show and let the rat tell his story. Tom's personal views have nothing to fucking do with what the content he's providing. You don't like rats, don't listen to it. If you don't like gangsters, don't listen to me. If you don't like what I got to say, don't listen to me. But you're holding people accountable by some weird imaginary code that practically barely exists anymore. Do you understand that? And I'm not defending some of the egregious stuff that some of these people might have done. I'm not defending some of the things they might have said, just like I would not expect them to defend some of the things that I fucking said. Fair and balanced across the board. That's how I try to be. I have a stance that I won't do it. Just as they have the right and the stance to do as they want. And let me make this obvious. Do you realize if I had wanted to go that route, I could have had all of the big time rats on my show before anybody else, because I was known before everybody else. But I made a choice never to do that. And everybody knows my history, so I'm not hiding anything, because that's what some people are going to go, oh, well, I'm not hiding anything, okay? But that's my thing. I could have built a successful show based on the words of informants. I could have done that. And I would have gotten all of them before everybody else. And I would probably be 10 times ahead of where I'm at now. But I made a conscious choice to pigeonhole myself by refusing to do that. That's just me. But other people have the right to do what they want. Fatball Sicilian, Jeff Nadeau, RJ, Tom LaVecchia. They have never, ever come out and been anti-informant. They haven't. They haven't, to my knowledge, unless you guys want to send me something where they're all saying, I hate all fucking rats, which none of them have ever said that. They have never taken a street narrative or a street perspective when it comes to informants and the mafia. They will say things that I won't say, and that's fine. Their perspective is to get the story as it applies to the record and to history, and that's it. We don't have to agree. We don't have to like it, but they have a right to do that. But just as they have a right to platform informants, I have the right and others have the right to attack their credibility. And I think that's fair. I think everybody would say that. That's a fair thing to do. But the last time I checked, not a single one of these guys was in the mafia, associated member, and neither am I. They don't have to be aligned any kind of way. You can't hold them to some imaginary fucking stance when from day one they have said they're going to do whatever they want. I'm not there to nitpick differences of opinions. We're entitled to have differences of opinions. But those who chastise, those who do platform them, need to realize not a single one of these men that I've mentioned are gangsters. Never were, never will be, and to my knowledge, none of them know any active people. But I could be wrong about that. It would surprise me, but that's not to negate whether they're good or bad or what they do. Now, as I said, everyone has the right to interview whoever the fuck they want. But as I said, you have to understand when you invite these informants on, you can't chastise them. You can't give them hardball questions. And sure, you can question Nadeau because he didn't ask about Alan Kaiser, which I think is a very relevant fucking question. But Nadeau knows if he asks that question, Sammy's just going to take off. But you can't hold Nadeau to some sort of moral, some sort of moralistic value because maybe he doesn't give a fuck about the Alan Kaiser thing. Maybe that's just not his thing. He's about getting Sammy on because it builds his channel and makes him name recognized. I get it. But that's his choice if he doesn't want to ask hard questions. And yes, does that mean he's going to take shit from his listeners because of it? Absolutely. But that's a decision that he made. You cannot call into questions, or you can't call into question the things that they're saying, because if you do, the rat's going to leave and not talk to you again. So if your position is commentary and news and stories, then your angle isn't, and if your angle is not anti-informant, then it's pro-story, right? Listen, none of these guys are stupid, okay? I know a lot of you like to pretend and think they are, but they realize fully that some stuff's inflated. A lot of stuff gets misconstrued, but they are not anti-informant. They're pro-history, pro-entertainment, and pro-stories. If we can accept that logic, then that's fine. Do they have a right to be chastised? Sure. But then again, they're bringing you stories from men, some bigger than others, who have those stories. None of the guys that I mentioned have waffled in terms of informants. RJ discusses history. He discusses the facts surrounding it, and he inflects his opinion, his educated opinion, that sometimes go against what the narrative of the show is. But he's a middle-of-the-road kind of content creator. He's not pro-mafia. He's not pro-government. He's just telling you what it is, laying it out, and at the end of the day, it's your choice to make up your own mind. That's just what he does, and I love that. And once again, none of these guys have waffled on that informant stance. And I say all of this my opinion doesn't matter when it comes to informants. It really doesn't matter. It's my opinion. I have my reasons just as other people have reasons for actually platforming them. I don't hold anybody personally accountable who puts on an informant. I get it. I understand why they're doing it. You know, would I like tougher questions? Sure, absolutely. But you know what? It's not my show. And my opinion and my beliefs are different than everybody else's. And, you know, I've sort of said that from day one. The difference is, then you have people like Lee Cole, okay, who has interviewed every single fucking rat that there has ever been that he could get his hands on. Okay? And then he takes this weird stance and then goes, oh, I'm never going to interview them again. And that people should unsubscribe to him if he ever interviews a rat again. And then guess what he does? He goes right back to interviewing fucking rats. And like I said earlier, if you want to interview an informant, that is your prerogative. But when you take a fake stance and you create fake outrage, and then you flip-flop every other fucking day, then you truly do not have a stance. And if you're doing this for numbers and for views, that's all it is. Those are just facts. Whether he likes it or not, those are facts. You have zero credibility when you waffle back and forth pretending to have some sort of stance when in fact you really just don't. You don't need to have a stance because you don't know anybody, you're not around anybody, never been around anybody, don't know nobody. You don't have to fucking have a stance. But to pretend or give the appearance of a stance is ridiculous to me. And so my point is to make it even more clear. If you don't have a stance, say, I'm going to have them on. God bless you. But when you pretend to have this, I hate rats, I'm going after all the rats. Bitch, please. Everybody knows you cater to every rat there is. Stop lying to me. We're not stupid. We see right fucking through that. And that's the hypocrisy that I'm talking about. You didn't have me fooled. You didn't have anybody else fooled. And now that you're getting called out for it, you don't like it. But here's the reality. Just like I say that you have the right to bring on whoever you want, the second that you sort of pretend to be this knight on a white horse who's going to take on all informants, I hate all of them, let me bash them. But then the second you can get one on your show, you're going to do it again. Then you never had that stance to begin with. And that's the lie that's perpetuated by you. You have to realize you don't have to be a tough guy. You don't got to be a street guy. You just have to be smart and do fucking research. That's all this is. But when you want to play the I hate all rats game and then you waffle right back like we knew you would, that makes you kind of a chump. It makes you full of shit. And that's why people are outraged, is because you say one thing and then do the opposite. Say one thing and do the opposite. The thing is, you don't have to be anything but you. But your own mouth is what puts you in that situation. Remember, and I say this about everybody, including myself, it's your show, do whatever you want. But when your words do not match your actions, and it's different every other day, people are going to jump you for that. Because you're taking a stance because it's popular. You don't have that true belief. That's what makes you a hypocrite. That's just true. And so people need to stop holding content creators accountable for platforming informants. You got to stop. You just got to stop. They do not have to be held to any sort of fucking standard. If the moral stance or if their core beliefs were against informants, then they platform them, then absolutely. If their core stance was that they were totally against them, they would never platform all of them, okay? People like Lee do not have a stance against any rat. It's optic anger. It's designed to get views and entertainment. He doesn't care if they're informants or not. He really doesn't give a shit. In fact, he thinks that's going to propel him, and it's the complete opposite. Secondly, let me dispel a myth right here and right now. Active street guys are not going to talk to content creators. Okay? Especially ones that platform informants. And those are facts. They won't. And I know that for a fact. I'm probably the only one that does. But that's different because I have relationships that are outside of what I do. But for anybody to come on their show and goes, oh, we know real mob guys who tell us shit. They don't tell you shit. That's a lie that you make up because you're putting out bullshit information that you're wrong on 99% of the time. And you're going to use that as an excuse to get the information wrong. Oh, we were fed wrong information. Nobody of any fucking mob ill repute is going to call Lee Cole on the phone. I can guarantee you that. I'm just telling you the truth. And talking to somebody that's in the mafia doesn't make you any more relevant. It doesn't. But when you use that as a crutch because all the information that you put out is inaccurate and wrong, you just use it as an excuse to blame on somebody else. And that's just the truth. End of the day, I don't judge anybody who platforms whoever. Do whatever you want. But I do draw a line in the sand completely when you say you're not going to platform rats. Meanwhile, you platformed every single fucking one that would come on your show. And then suddenly you have this come to Jesus meeting on a Tuesday and say, I'm never going to talk to any rat again. And if I ever interview one, unsub to me. And then guess what? Surprise Friday, you're talking to another rat. Probably the worst of them all. Probably the one guy that legitimately had no balls, who had no acumen, who's full of shit on every single fucking level. That's why I call him Bumbling Bobby. You have no scruples and you have no character when you waffle like that. That's the secret to this game. That's the secret to the genre. Just be yourself. You don't have to have a stance. I've been doing this a decade. Before any of these people came around, I was the only one attacking informants. The only one. I started this. People forget that. I was the only fucking one on YouTube screaming about informants, showing paperwork. The only one for a decade before people came around. I was in the trenches when nobody else was, before it became the popular thing to do. And I'm glad that people are attacking informants. I think it's an important thing because just like informants have their narrative and their story, the other side has a story too. And listen, you're never, ever going to get people to stop listening to informants. And the reality is this. These guys were in organized crime. Whether you like it or not, they were. Each and every single fucking one of them, to some extent, was in organized crime. And so when people watch these shows, they feel like they're getting a perspective that they could not get from a real, live, active made guy. And I understand it. But if you go into that, knowing that they're going to lie a little bit, knowing they're going to capitulate, knowing that the majority of these cases, these guys couldn't do a fucking day in jail, so they ratted out everybody and their mother so they wouldn't have to go to jail. If you can know that going into it, then fine. If it's entertainment for you, there's nothing wrong. But please remember, there is always another side to that fucking coin. Always another side. And that's just the truth. You can argue all day the morality of telling on another person. I get it. There are two sides to every coin. And when you don't share the other side of that coin, then technically you're taking a stance. And that's just the truth. You're taking a stance by not offering the other side. But I get it. A lot of people just want to have somebody on, let them talk, and the audience enjoys it. And I get it. They don't have to take a stance. Me, I'm different. I take a stance. That's just me. The most important thing is just as every informant has their side, there's an entire another side to this the public will never see unless they're told about it. So people that are attacking informants, and this is why I said earlier, you call them names, you're not really doing anything. You're mocking them, which is hilarious, I got to admit, on some level. But how you really hurt an informant is using paperwork, their lies, and then matching what they say in court transcripts versus what they say publicly. That's the big difference. People change their stories. J.R. Rubio, good example, said on a podcast, he framed a guy for an arson job to give the FBI more information to get a better deal. It's insane. And that's the shit that infuriates me. And unless you're willing to download all court documents and look at the case honestly, not saying everybody's innocent, not saying everybody's guilty, because at the end of the day, let's all be honest about one glowing motherfucking fact. If you weren't involved in something, you wouldn't be in that position to begin with, okay? Across the board, let's just be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. However, unless you're going to pull those court documents from the FBI, the court transcripts, and unless you're going to honestly look at the tape transcripts, the wiretap transcripts, unless you're going to take the time to truly look at a case, then you giving an opinion is bullshit. Because you don't know the case. You're going off what this says, or this jerk off Jerry Capisci says, or what Scott Bernstein says. You're listening to pundits. So I always say the best thing you can do is take time, invest in transcripts, take time, invest in Pacer, and pay the money and look at the case for what it is. Because guess what? You're going to get the prosecution side of things. You're going to get the defense side of things. And what you can do then is provide that to your audience and say, listen, I have nothing to gain or lose by this. So here's the government's stance. Here's the defense's stance. What do you guys think? This is what I can pick out that kind of looks a little odd to me. The difference with me and other people is that I had a situation a year ago where people I know, people I care about, people I'm close to got pinched over a fucking rat. And I knew what the rat was lying about. Because this rat, in that case, I don't even want to go into it. Because I've talked about it over on our paid podcast, and people were blown away with this shit that happened. Rats are going to be a necessity in every government's case. Those are facts. But there's one thing I want everybody to know. And this is the most important thing. When you are defending yourself in any situation, okay, especially when it involves RICO acts or predicates, they can use anything against you in a sentencing report. So, for instance, let's pretend in 1989, I was charged with murder and acquitted of that. They can use that against me to show that I have a history of being involved with or associated with or accused of. But in this country, the reality is this, whether you like it or not. If I'm not convicted of it, you cannot say that I did it. But yet in the federal system, you can use that against a defendant. However, when that defendant decides, okay, well, they're going to say all this, so let's go after the rat and let's use tapes from the jail where the rat is basically perjuring himself, the judge says, no, we can't use those. Well, why not? If you can assassinate my character in a court of law and bring up accusations, things I was acquitted of, why the fuck can't I bring up that this guy's talking about butt fucking aliens? That's the reality. And that's the problem that I have with it. You know, if the scales of justice were even, I'd have nothing to complain about. And listen, I'm not naive enough to think everybody's innocent either, okay? But that's the stuff that angers me. And when I see an informant go on a show, specifically bumbling dumb fuck, fat fuck Bobby Luisi, who lied about people I know before. You don't ask no questions, but yet you're anti-rat, or are you a rat lover? Which one is it? Because I think you're really a rat lover, to be honest with you. But that's what I get upset about. But like I said, here's the thing. If you claim to have a stance and then you platform them, then you're more egregious than others who just bring on rats because you're propelling their lies knowing they're lying. If you have an anti-rat stance, you're more egregious. And what I mean by that is if you say, oh, I hate all rats, I'm not going to interview them. Well, you know they lie. You know X, Y, and Z. But people who come out of the gate saying I'm going to have them on my show, I just don't give a fuck. I got more respect for them than I do for somebody who goes back and forth and changes their mind a million times. Because you know both sides of that coin. And you're more egregious because you know they're full of shit. You know they're going to come on your show and propel lies. You're not going to ask them tough questions. You're propelling their fucking narrative. knowing they're lying to you, lying to your audience, and that makes you a bigger hypocrite than anybody else who platforms them. Because on Tuesday you wear green, on Friday you wear pink. But once again, the most important thing, and then final, you don't have to have a fucking stance. You don't. There's no reason for you to have a stance. Not a single one of these content creators, to my knowledge, knows anybody in organized crime that's been indicted, other than informants. I do. I have family members that were. It impacts me personally. It's different with me. And that's just the truth. Whether you like it or not, the reality is informants, like I said before, we're in the life. You can't take that away from them. You just can't. But if you hold them to a certain standard, listen, if your job is to be like a journalist, all right, fine. You're not going to ask tough questions. It's okay. It's your show. But you can't get mad at other people who hear that, know the opposite, can prove the opposite, and then say something to you about it. That's the problem with the genre. Nothing you can do is ever going to be perfect. It just, if you're going to hold somebody accountable, if you guys listening are going to hold anybody accountable, hold the people who waffle accountable. Because they're more egregious than anybody else. Because they're playing you like you're fucking stupid. And you're not stupid. You go to a content creator show to listen, to be entertained, and learn something. But when that information that you're receiving is not factual, made up from Wikipedia and bullshit, you're being fed like the pill, like the fucking mice in the maze. And you just follow the fucking maze because you know where the pill is. But they insult your intelligence, people who waffle like that. They're insulting your intelligence. And that's just the bottom line for me. There's nothing more fake than a waffler. That's just my opinion. You know my stance, but, listen, you can't from day one, have a set of fake principles and then turn around and not expect to be called out for that. But you have a right to do whatever you want. But stop holding people to fake standards they don't need to have. If Jeff Nadeau was a gangster, you can hold him to that standard. You're a gangster. You're supposed to have a street code. What the fuck are you doing talking to a rat? Tom LaVecchia, same thing. And listen, Tom's no fool. He knows John Panisi's full of shit and other guys are full of shit. He's not a dumb guy. But they're not in the business to being truth seekers. They are in the business to bring you entertainment and history from one perspective. But there is a difference between them and someone who has fake outrage and someone who wants to sort of pretend they're all about being stand up and they want to pretend like they talk to gangsters and they want to pretend like they know it all and they want to pretend like they're seeking the truth. Because really, at the end of the day, the only truth they're seeking is coming out of your pocket. And that's the bottom line. Because Jeff Canarsie says so.